Hello, my name is Anna Nikolaevna Doborovich, and I'm planning today to talk with you about the British monarchy today. So, what is it nowadays? What rules do they have in the British monarchy system and in the UK's system of government? So, I'm going to talk to you about the basic rules of the constitutional monarchy in the United Kingdom nowadays, and I hope we'll speculate together about the future of the British monarchy, which the country has in advance, and the country has ahead. So definitely everybody knows that monarchy is the oldest form of the government of the United Kingdom. Speaking of the British Constitution is definitely the basic and the most important document of the UK's system of government. So the British Constitution has definitely a number of significant features, and one of those significant features is the fact that it has no written form. So officially, the country, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, is known as the constitutional monarchy. So what does it mean? Constitutional monarchy means that the head of the state is the monarch, a king or a queen, and the power of the monarch is definitely limited by the British Constitution. So speaking about the Constitution in general, the Constitution has three branches, and it means that it has three parts. So the Parliament and the major function of the Parliament is making laws. So the Parliament makes laws. The second branch of the British Constitution is the government, and speaking of the major function of the government, it is the branch that executes laws. In other words, it puts them into effect. So the third branch of the British Constitution is the law courts. They interpret laws which are made in the United Kingdom. So as I said before, the king or the queen, nowadays it's Elizabeth II, she is the head of state. And since her powers are limited by the British Constitution, the country is, the system of the country is known as the constitutional monarchy. So although nowadays the sovereign has no longer political or executive power, they continue play an important role in the life of the nation. As head of state, the monarch undertakes a number of different duties. So, according to the structure of the Constitution, the UK's state system can be divided into three parts, and it has three major branches. So, the legislative branch, and as I said before, the legislative branch is represented by the Parliament, which makes laws. The second branch is the executive branch, which is the government. They put those laws into effect. And the third branch is the judicial branch. They interpret the laws. So, monarchy is one of the oldest institutions of the UK's political system, and definitely the history of the monarchy goes back to the 9th century. And here you might see the list of all the British monarchs that have served the country and played their significant roles in the making of the United Kingdom. As head of state, as I said, as head of state, the monarch undertakes constitutional and representational duties, which have developed over 1,000 years of history. In addition to the state duties, the monarch has a less formal role as head of nation, and the sovereign also acts as a focus for national identity, unity and pride. The monarch also represents a sense of stability and continuity. The Queen nowadays officially recognizes success and excellence and supports the ideal of voluntary service. I would like to say a few words about the rules of succession to the throne. As I mentioned, the history of monarchy goes back to over 1,000 years ago, and there have been a number of different rules that regulated the rules of succession to the throne. In the past, only the sons had precedence over the daughters in succeeding to the throne. And definitely it was the basic rule of the succession to the throne. But the succession to the throne is not regulated only by the rules of descent, but also by parliamentary statute. The basis for the succession to the throne are the following documents: the Bill of Rights that was adopted in the 17th century during the period of the Civil War, and definitely speaking of 1689, that was the post-war period, the period of after the Civil War, and the second act that regulated the rules of succession to the throne is the Act of Settlement. The Act of Settlement was adopted at the beginning of the 18th century in 1701. But a few years ago, some time ago, in 2013, the Parliament decided to make some changes in accordance with the rules of succession to the throne. And the Succession to the Throne Act that was adopted by the British Parliament in 2013 amended the Bill of Rights and the Act of Settlement. According to those amendments that were made in this Act of Succession to the Crown Act, the rules of succession regulated the system of male primogeniture. According to those amendments, nowadays both sons and daughters of the royal family are equal in succeeding to the throne. That is one of the basic changes that was made back in 2013. And another important change that was also made in 2013 is connected with the sphere of religion, and nowadays an heir to the throne is allowed to marry a Catholic. So this is something that was not allowed to be done back before 2013. In this slide, you can see the royal family, and these numbers briefly show the order of succession to the throne. So nowadays, the line of succession is a bit different because the family is expanding. So the first heir to the throne is definitely the Prince of Wales, and this is Prince Charles. And after that, his sons are allowed to succeed, to ascend to the throne, and after that, the sons of Prince Charles's son. So the sons and the daughters actually of Prince William. So now I would like to continue speaking about the basic and the most important functions of the UK's monarch, and this is definitely Elizabeth II. So Elizabeth II represents the country, represents the country on different level, and definitely on the political level. And as we mentioned before, the United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy, and despite the fact that nowadays the Queen doesn't play a very important political role in the country, she is still an important symbol of national unity. So in law, she is an important symbol of unity. She is the head of the political system, so she is the head of the executive branch. She is also an integral part of the legislature. She is the head of the judiciary. She is also the commander-in-chief of all the armed forces of the Crown. And speaking of the connection of the political system of the United Kingdom and the Church of England, she is also the supreme governor of the established Church of England. So definitely the Queen takes part in a lot of important acts of government. She summons the Parliament, and being the head of the executive branch, definitely she has to perform a number of duties connected with the executive branch. So besides summoning the Parliament, she also has a right to prorogue it. And proroguing means stopping the Parliament meeting without an official ending of the session. So besides those functions, she also has a right to dissolve the Parliament. In the sphere of lawmaking process, she gives her royal assent to bills that are passed by Parliament and the Scottish Parliament. Speaking about the political system of the United Kingdom, I can't but mention the fact that besides the Parliament that acts for the whole country, which is the Parliament in Westminster in London, the seat is called Westminster Palace. The country also has the Scottish Parliament, which is located in the capital of Scotland. And the other nations, I mean Wales and Northern Ireland, have their own political bodies to function for their nations. For example, speaking of Wales, they have the Welsh Assembly, and the National Assembly for Wales functions and acts for the people of Wales. The Northern Ireland Assembly acts and functions, performs its duties for the people of Northern Ireland, and another name which is commonly famous all over the country and even in the world for the National Assembly for Wales is Stormont. So Stormont is the name that was taken after the name of Stormont Castle, where the Northern Ireland Assembly is located. So, as I mentioned, speaking of the executive and legislative branch, the Queen has to perform the duties which are connected with the work of both the Parliament and the government. Besides that, the Queen also appoints many important office holders. One of the best examples to illustrate this function of the Queen is definitely the appointment of the Prime Minister. After every general elections which are normally held, normally are held every 4 years, the Queen, every 5 years, sorry, the Queen has to officially appoint the Prime Minister. And this is one of the other functions of the Queen. Besides that, the Queen pardons people convicted of crimes and confers peerages knighthoods and other honors. Speaking of some of the ceremonies which are also connected with the functions of the monarch, definitely it is reasonable to mention the ceremonies of investitures. This is when the Queen awards and confers different honors to the people of the United Kingdom, and she also confers peerages, knighthoods, and a number of other honors. Definitely, nowadays the Queen is supported, particularly nowadays the Queen is supported by the members of their immediate family. By the way, just a couple of days ago the Queen turned 94 years old, and definitely some of her duties have been transferred to the members of her immediate family. The United Kingdom political system sometimes is also called as the parliamentary democracy. So what does it mean? It means that the government is voted into the power by the people in order to act in the interests of the people of the society. Every adult over 18 years old has the right to vote, and this right is known as the Universal Suffrage. So the Universal Suffrage means the right to vote. Alongside this system, the UK, as we mentioned, is also a constitutional monarchy. And in this system, and according to these rules, the monarch should remain politically impartial, and the monarch has some limited powers. So, along with the legislative branch of the United Kingdom, which is the Parliament, the Crown is an integral part of the institution of the Parliament. The Queen plays a constitutional role in this sphere according to the rules of the legislative branch. So she opens and dissolves the Parliament and approves bills before they become laws. The Crown is another way of referring to the monarchy. The monarchy is the oldest part of the system of government, and over the time, throughout many years of history, the time has reduced the power of the monarchy. And nowadays we can say it is mostly ceremonial. Elizabeth II came to power about 68 years ago. So, and nowadays she is considered to be the longest reigning monarch. And her coronation took place in Westminster Abbey, which is part of the place of Westminster, and the coronation took place on the 2nd of June in 1953. It was a grotesque ceremony. It was a solemn ceremony that was conducted by Dr. Geoffrey Fisher, the Archbishop of Canterbury. And the Archbishop of Canterbury is the head of the Church of England. So representatives of the peers, who are the members of one of the chambers of the Parliament, the Chamber of Lords, the House of Lords, the Commons, the Commons was represented definitely by the MPs, members of the Parliament, and definitely all the great public interests in Britain, the prime ministers and leading citizens of the other Commonwealth countries, representatives of foreign states, and some other distinguished figures of the world were present during this coronation. The monarch normally opens the Parliament through the State opening of the parliament, and this is the annual ceremony in which the Queen also plays an important role. So the state opening of the parliament marks the beginning of a new parliamentary year. The monarch only dissolves parliament before a general election under conditions which are laid out in the Fixed Term Parliament Act of 2011. One of the major functions and duties of the monarch in accordance with the state opening of the parliament is the Queen's speech. During the state opening of the parliament, the Queen is expected to read the speech, which is not written by the Queen herself, but the Queen is supposed to read it in front of the public. The monarch informs the Parliament of the government's policy, ideas and plans for new legislation, and the speech is normally delivered from the throne, which is located in the House of Lords, because the Queen is definitely the member of the House of Lords. So the Queen reads out the speech, and the members of both houses, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, are present, and they listen to the policy which is outlined in this speech. I would like to tell you a few words about one of the functions that I have already mentioned, and this is giving the royal assent to all the bills which go through both houses. So, speaking of the procedure, it is strictly organized and it's well structured. When a bill has been approved by a majority of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, it is normally agreed to by the Crown. And this procedure is known as the royal assent. This turns a bill into an Act of Parliament, and only after that a bill becomes law in the United Kingdom. So the Queen has ruled for longer than any other monarch in the British history, and she has become a much loved and respected figure across the globe. And speaking of some other functions and some other duties that the Queen has been performing throughout many centuries, I would like to start with some facts that date back to the post-war period. When Elizabeth became Queen, and as you remember, I mentioned that she succeeded to the throne in 1953. That was the time of the official coronation. Britain still had at that time a substantial empire, dominions and dependencies. However, during the 1950s and 1960s, many of these possessions of the United Kingdom achieved independence, and the British Empire evolved into the Commonwealth of Nations. And at that time, the role of Elizabeth II was connected with visiting the former colonies of the British Empire, and her role was connected with the idea of uniting the Commonwealth. And she acted as a representative of Britain, and one of the most groundbreaking trips that she made then, during the post-war period, was a groundbreaking trip to Germany in 1965. That was the time when she became the first British monarch to make a state visit there, I mean a visit to Germany, in more than 5 decades. So speaking of the later period that dates back to 1970s and 1980s, Elizabeth continued to travel extensively. Speaking of, for example, the year of 1973, she attended the Commonwealth Conference in Ottawa, in Canada, and in 1976 she traveled to the United States for the 200th anniversary celebration of America's independence from Britain. In 1982, Elizabeth worried about her second son, Prince Andrew, because it was the time of troubles, and her son at that time served as a helicopter pilot in the British Royal Navy during the Falklands War, and at that time Britain went to war with Argentina over the Falkland Islands, and that was a clash that lasted for several weeks. In this conflict, a lot of people died. More than 250 British soldiers died, and definitely, speaking of those times, that was the Queen's greatest worry. I mean, her son was her greatest worry. So fortunately, Prince Andrew returned home safe and sound, and it was the time when his mother was relieved. A bit later, in 2011, Elizabeth showed that the crown still had symbolic and diplomatic power. And it was the time when she became the first British monarch to visit the Republic of Ireland since 1911. And the beginning of the 20th century was the time when Ireland, the southern part of the island of Ireland was still part of the United Kingdom. A bit later, the southern part of this island decided to separate and to secede the United Kingdom, and it happened in 1922. And speaking of 2011, as I said before, Elizabeth II at that time visited the Republic of Ireland for the first time since the beginning of the 20th century. So in terms of financial support, I will have to say that Elizabeth II has also modernized the monarchy. So they decided to drop some of its formalities and made certain sites and treasures more accessible to the public. As Britain and other nations struggled financially, Britain abolished the civil list in 2012. And the civil list of 2012 was a public funding system of the monarchy that dated back roughly 250 years. So the royal family continues to receive some government support, but the Queen has cut back on some spending, and that was also one of the important changes in monarchy. So as for the future of the British monarchy, nowadays it is considered to be one of the pressing issues in both the political life and in the other fields of life of the United Kingdom. In order to answer this question, we have to define what exactly is the role of the monarch in Britain today, and we might examine some of the aspects of the existence of the monarchy nowadays, and we'll try to speculate about the most important aspects of the British monarchy nowadays. So definitely the role of the monarchy is still considered to be an intelligible part of the British Constitution. The monarch's function of signing into law acts passed by Parliament is an integral part of the legislative process, and actually the monarch still technically holds the right to veto or to say no to some bills adopted by the Parliament. But nowadays this is a very rare occasion. So speaking of some historical events, I should say that the last monarch to veto a bill that had to pass through the Parliament was Queen Anne. A few words about Queen Anne. She ruled the country at the beginning of the 18th century, and she was the last one, as I said, to veto the bill. And it was the bill of 1708, and that was called Scottish Militia Bill. So having this opportunity to veto a bill, as I said, nowadays it is a very rare occurrence. Besides that, the monarch also receives newly appointed ambassadors to the United Kingdom who are accredited to her court rather than to the state. The monarch also still at the present the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and she also recruits the people. I mean, she also is accredited to perform her duties in order to congratulate new recruits that have to swear allegiance to the monarch rather than to the Parliament or to the state. In this and in many other functions, the Queen acts as a living symbol, as a living personification of the British state. While the majority of the monarch's powers have been transferred to the head of the government for the Prime Minister to use it at his discretion, it would be inaccurate to say that the monarch has no direct input into the decision-making process in Britain. But anyway, despite the fact that nowadays the monarch mostly plays a symbolic, representative function, I have to say that it is perhaps her most effective role in the late 20th century and still at the beginning of the 21st century. So, the majority of the Queen's workload nowadays consists of representing the state at home and the nation abroad. On state visits, the Queen attracts interest from the foreign public and media who help raise the profile of the nation overseas. The role of the monarch which is still performed nowadays as strengthening the government of the country with religion, refers to the monarch's combined role as head of state and governor of the established Church of England. This role, which is performed of the monarch, signifies the importance of the Church to the British establishment and their core values and traditions. Despite the fact, as I said, the role of the monarch in terms of uniting all the branches with the Church of England is extremely significant nowadays, despite the fact that nowadays the interest to religion is declining in the country. So, but the Queen has largely remained the head of the Church since the Reformation that was made in the country by Henry VIII, when papal authority was abolished in England. And it happened in the first half of the 16th century in 1534. So it was the time when officially the Church of England was established by one of the Tudor kings, who was Henry VIII. Despite the changing role of the monarch nowadays at the beginning of the 21st century, despite the changes in the society, we have to say that the Queen is able to symbolize the country, is still the person who is trying to unite the country. And speaking of the post-war years, Britain has increasingly become a multi-faith society since then, where the religions practiced in the former British Empire became increasingly popular within the United Kingdom herself. Having a head of state as head of a certain branch of Christianity might seem inappropriate and even divisive. In addition, marital troubles of the governor's 4 children, 3 of whom are divorced, definitely played its role in the making of the British monarchy. So the role of head of state is still an important and significant role at the beginning of the 21st century. And I should also say that the reign of Queen Elizabeth II hasn't always been a bed of roses. One of the most difficult times that the Queen even called as annus horribilis in one of her speeches is the year of 1992. That was a tragic year for the royal family, and one of the reasons for that was a fire at her residence of Windsor Castle, 2 divorces and a separation, and at that time the life of the royal family seemed more like the life of a family in a kind of a soap opera, and rather than a regal and ruling dynasty, maybe. So, but still, so at that time, also the marriage of Elizabeth II's son Charles to Diana made headlines for years before the couple announced the separation in 1992. So the announcement of that separation also was one of the sad events that date back to those times. And the announcement of the separation was also followed by the formal divorce in 1996. In the wake of Diana's death in a Paris car crash on the 31st of August in 1997, Elizabeth experienced intense media scrutiny. And her incredibly popular ex-daughter-in-law had been called the People's Princess. The Queen at that time was at her Balmoral estate in Scotland with Charles and her grandsons, Prince William and Prince Harry, and for some days Elizabeth remained silent while the country desperately mourned Diana's passing. And at that time she was sharply criticized for such a way of reacting to the events, to those sad events. So stories circulated that the Queen did not want to give Diana a royal funeral, which only fueled public sentiment against the monarch. And only nearly a week after Diana's death, Elizabeth returned to London and issued a statement on the late princess. So that was also one of those sad and unpleasant events that took place during the reign of Elizabeth II. So as for the major, maybe characteristic features of the British monarchy, I would say that one of them is its survival. So survival of the British monarchy has always been the priority for the British crown. They have been trying to survive starting with the period that date back to the 17th century, when Charles I made the fatal mistake of going against the Parliament. And since the period of the Glorious Revolution, a coup d'etat which replaced the Catholic James II and his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband William III, the crown has slowly given up its power to the Parliament. Indeed, the Parliament has a record of inviting foreign rulers to take over the throne in Westminster. The Bill of Rights of 1689, after the Glorious Revolution, greatly reduced the royal prerogative, and the last monarch to withhold royal assent for a parliamentary bill was Queen Anne. And definitely a few words about the later monarchs. Speaking of Queen Victoria that reigned during the 19th century. We have to say that she was also disappointed that she could not appoint the Prime Minister herself and had to agree with the wishes of the Parliament. So at that time, the royal family gradually transferred into a British model family, and the monarch became a popular figurehead. They survived, and survival, as I said before, has already become one of the principles of the royal family. And they survived. They have been trying to survive despite the fact that, as Walter Bagehot put it, despite the fact that UK was already a secret republic. And Walter Bagehot was a famous economist and journalist of the 19th century. So as for the 20th century and the major changes that happened to take place in the history of the monarchy, definitely we have to mention the beginning of the 20th century. In 1917, George V changed the family name from the distinctly German family name that sounded as Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the more Albion name, which is Windsor, and this is the family name of the British royal family nowadays. And that was also one of the changes, significant changes in the monarchy. And the other important fact which is connected with the reign of the royal family, the family of Windsor in particular, is connected with the name of George VI, and his actions during the Second World War are definitely regarded as the most important actions of the period of the war. So it was the time when he made the nation see him as a point of unity. So despite the fact that he was the monarch, his family and he himself stayed in Buckingham Palace as bombs rained on London. And the family, the royal family, were trying to keep to the same rationing regime as their subjects. So as for the basic conclusion that I would like to say, maybe in terms of the future of the monarchy and the role that the royal family are playing nowadays in the society, I have to say that the British monarchy has the ability to evolve and adapt, and its survival to date is testament to its success in timely reinvention. So this is the emergence of a symbolic monarchy and a royal family under Queen Victoria at a time of rising Republican sentiment, or the renaming of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to House of Windsor during the First World War. So those are the pieces of evidence that give the idea that the monarchy evolves and adapts and is and definitely the monarchy has been trying to survive. So speaking of the imperial role, definitely the imperial role disappeared with the empire, and there is no inevitability or requirement that it will remain in the British monarch. I mean, the power, the imperial power and the power will always remain in the British monarch's hand. So only the time will tell if the monarchy will still be the sufficient part of the UK's system. So, but as for the functions and the duties of the monarch nowadays, I have to say that the British monarch continues to keep an impressive schedule. So still, despite her age, she has a number of official engagements that are carried out by her, and the number of official engagements carried out, let's say, in 2019 did not decrease compared with the previous year. Figures, for example, that were compiled by The Times show that she carried out 295 engagements in 2019 compared with the number of engagements of 2018 that refers to 283. So the Queen remains very much at the helm of the firm. And the firm is another word which is used in order to talk and refer to the British Crown. And she has, despite the fact that she has already turned 94, there are certain duties that require definitely the support of her family, and she still performs the duties herself. So just to round up, I should say that the changes during the Queen's 68-year reign have been immense, though gradual, an empire has become a commonwealth. Deference to aristocracy has been displaced by the adulation of celebrity. Formality has given way to familiarity. The focus of morality has shifted from personal ethics to corporate responsibility. And if you are under 30, the ubiquitous smartphone and social media have replaced mass media. So these are the realities of the modern society, and that graphically illustrate a generational change in the society since it was the Queen's coronation in 1953. So addressing the Parliament at the start of her Golden Jubilee celebration in 2002, the Queen said, "Change is a constant. Managing it has become an expanding discipline. So the way we embrace it defines our future." And I would like to finish my talk today and my speculations about the present and the future of the British monarchy with these words. And I definitely agree that the royal, these words which were pronounced by Queen Elizabeth II in 2002 about the changes that the royal family, the members of the royal family are facing nowadays, and those changes and are still changing their functions in the society, and they are important in the life of both the royal family and the life of the British society. Thank you for listening and participating in my talk today. Thank you very much.